The following podcast is sponsored by StructureTech.
In terms of leverage as a buyer, you have none, and it's totally a seller's market. And at StructureTech, we're responding to that need by offering a new product. And when we get into this podcast a little bit, Ruben's going to unveil it. Welcome, everybody. You're listening to Structure Talk, a StructureTech presentation. My name is Bill Ulrich, alongside Tessa Murray and Ruben Saltzman. As always, welcome from the Northland. The three-legged stool is no longer encased in ice. We are melting away in this beautiful February, the last week of February, I should say. We can timestamp this podcast because it's coming to you nearly hot off the press. So on today's episode, we're going to dig into the local real estate market a little bit. And we've got a special guest on the podcast today, Realtor Jim Starr, Realtor extraordinaire. And Jim's going to be sharing his views on the market. But we're rolling out a new product here at StructureTech because it's literal chaos out there right now for anybody who's looking to buy a home. In terms of leverage as a buyer, you have none. And it's totally a seller's market. And at StructureTech, we're responding to that need by offering a new product. And when we get into this podcast a little bit, Ruben's going to unveil it. So everybody, drum roll, please. We're not going to say it yet. We're going to hang here a little bit.
The title of the podcast may give it away, but that's okay. That's okay. Yeah. We'll pretend like nobody saw it.
Well, as you can tell, I'm just the host and I don't actually see any of the production material before it gets posted. So I'm sorry I made that flub. But Jim.
No, it's okay. It's a working title, Bill. It's all right.
That's awesome. Well, Jim, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself in just 30 seconds, but I have to let my co-hosts get in a word of introduction here too. So how's the week going?
Good. Oh, it's going great. We're looking to hire our next batch of home inspectors to train. So we're super excited about that. Been working hard on interviewing and finding the right people.
Awesome. Ruben, what's up in your world?
Blogging, podcasting, helping Tessa with these interviews, just narrowing it down. We are in the final scramble to get our new batch of home inspectors beginning their training. It is a lot of work, and hats off to Tessa for all she's doing on this. It is incredible. Yeah.
This hiring process that we're doing now is very involved, and there's a lot of people that play an important role in it. So thank you, team.
Awesome. Well, Jim, let's get you to pull up to the microphone here. And why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us who you're with, kind of give some background on who Jim Starr is.
Sure. Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Ruben and Tessa and everyone for having me. I'm Jim Starr. I am Realtor with RE/MAX Advantage Plus. I've been in the business full-time as a real estate agent it'll be going on 20 years. I kind of was practicing before I was officially a realtor since about 94, 95. And eventually went into it full time. So RE/MAX Advantage Plus out of our Eagan office is where we're at. And in all honesty, I have no idea how many agents are in our office because we're just too busy to go in. I just went to RE/MAX Advantage Plus recently. And so I couldn't tell you too much about our office because we're on the road a good 6-8 hours a day. So,
well, I think that gives us a slight clue as to what the real estate market's like in the Twin Cities here in the last week of February. So what are you seeing out there? Is it total and complete chaos?
You know, it is. I had Coldwell Banker agent reach out to me. I've had a couple listings, 2 come on in the last 2 weeks that immediately went. Very interesting scenarios. One was in Eden Prairie, it was a townhome. One was over in Como Park, literally right on Como Park Conservatory. And the process leading up to it was getting busy about 5 days before. It was so insane, Bill. I had to literally sit last weekend, Friday, 8 a.m., pretty much through Friday night, at my computer answering emails, calls, texts. We had what came down to it, and StructureTech did our truth and housing inspection. What came down to it was 52 showings in 32 hours because some people were doing overlapping showings, even though I thought I restricted that. And we ended up having 18 offers total I cut off showings Saturday at 6 p.m. And to give you an idea, agents who knew that they hadn't made the cut were still contacting me on Sunday afternoon trying to get us to reconsider. So it was pretty crazy week last week, but literally it was Friday, 8 a.m., taking calls and everything through Saturday evening and then into Sunday. And I think we wrapped it up with signatures and everything Sunday at about 6:21 p.m.
Wow.
So just to complete the picture, 3 things I want to know, Jim. What What was the size of the house? What was the age? And what was the list price? Can you share that with me?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So size of the house was 1,911 feet. And I want to say it was 1922. I'll double check was the age of the house, but for sure it was 1911. I got it officially measured, appraisal measured, but it was listed at 397.5, which was a very competitive price for a lot of reasons. Based on square footage, it kind of pushes the envelope a little bit, but it's a really wonderful, wonderful micro market and block. Because this house where you basically step outside the front door, gorgeous house, you're literally on the conservatory property. I think it was the historic rail station building at Como Park there is right out their front door. And then their trails and everything. So literally we hit a home run with location on it, or I did, because that's kind of was indicative of how busy it was. So.
All right. Now the question of essence, and I don't know how much of this you can share, but I'm going to push.
I'm going to be dancing around it. I think I know what's coming, but
what was the offer that was accepted? You don't need to tell me the exact numbers, but what was it?
Yeah, gotcha. So again, another agent from Caldwell reached out this morning because there's another home maybe coming on that he caught wind of. And you're about the sixth or seventh person who's asked me. All other six people were agents in the business because, people want any kind of edge. Ultimately, what came down to it was many factors. I'll say right up front, this was not the highest offer in terms of price. So it came down to a combination of the strongest offer and terms, in addition to price, in addition to buyer flexibility, in addition to the lender was fantastic because the lender reached out to me twice. The agent was phenomenal. He did a masterful job, I thought, with texting, emailing, calling, following up, staying in touch with me without overdoing it. And he was very cordial. I'll just say up front, there were some agents that submitted offers and one in particular went from first to worst during a conversation because of that encounter. And I told my sellers about it and they said they weren't interested. So listing at 397.5, what can I tell you for price? For sure, it's north of 425. Out of 18 offers, about 50% of them were north of 425.
Crazy.
Oh my gosh.
Yep.
So somewhere close to 30 grand over asking price.
Correct. So, okay, the price is even north of that. So even more.
We'll just save Jim the cold sweat that you're putting him in right now, Ruben, and just say,
come on,
somebody
Ruben,
paid a premium price to live in the great city of St. Paul.
We don't even know the address of the house. So
It was in St. Paul. It was in Como.
There was a handful of offers north of 430 even. So we'll just leave it at that.
I assume that the offer was accepted contingent upon a home inspection, correct?
You would be incorrect in your assumption, actually. So in preparing for the podcast, I was thinking, okay, let's go back over the 18 offers. Every agent I tried to call, I really wanted this to be fair for not just my sellers, but all the agents, all the buyers. Right out of the gate, 7 of the buyers dropped out based on our conversations with their agent. They just weren't going to be playing ball. So we went from 18 to 11, and then of the top 11, a top 5. Of the top 5, then it came down to some really grueling terms negotiations that took place. The winning, actually, I'll just say this. I know there are at least 5 of the 11 remaining offers that did not have inspection contingencies built into the purchase.
That is crazy. So I didn't even discuss this with you beforehand. I mean, we teed this up really beautifully, but I kind of thought that this is where it was going to go. And that's the whole purpose of this podcast today, is to discuss that exact topic. People writing offers that are not contingent upon home inspection to get their offers accepted.
Absolutely. Well, it's a darned if you do, darned if you don't situation. First of all, what I could tell, I mean, I'm a buyer's agent too. Buyers are losing offers left and right. It's for a lot of reasons, whether it's, interest rates are great, so it's not free money, but pretty free as it gets if you're mortgaging, to price point, to some buyers are writing, I call them buyer love letters to the sellers that may or may not be delivered depending on the listing agent. There's a lot of different terms. When it comes down to inspections, it's really interesting because it depends on not just how the purchase agreement is structured, but it depends on how the buyer's agent kind of does the setup with it. Sometimes in my purchase agreements, I'll make something purchase contingent on inspection, but then there's another field and I'll say buyer's choice to decide if they choose to perform a radon inspection in addition to a sewer line scope inspection during the inspection contingency period. And that was pretty standard statement I'd put in, but I also know the more I put in, the less likely the sellers would go, I don't want these people digging into everything. And so, it just depends on the situation and whether or not I'm going to be overly descriptive or less descriptive. But I always recommend an inspection. This particular home I'm referring to, it was really interesting because of just high velocity. It was so insane. About half of the ending offers had inspection contingencies and half didn't.
So what do you think about that? I mean, is that something where you've ever been involved in a transaction where you've brought that up to your clients and you said, hey, it's competitive. You want to buy this house. You want to get it. If you want to make it more competitive, let's make it not contingent upon a home inspection. Have you ever done this before?
Well, my clients have done it. I honestly cannot remember ever telling clients, even in new construction, because Structure Tech did an inspection for us back in like 2011 on a house in Maple Grove, brand new construction, wasn't finished yet. Actually, Ruben, I think you were the inspector. The buyers didn't want to do an inspection. I'm like, you better do an inspection because new construction, I think you guys have a class on it. There's issues. And sure enough, the carpet guys carpeted over a heat duct in the dining room. A whole section of the front half of a dormer had above I don't know if it was the dining room or the foyer, had no insulation. I mean, there must have been 5 or 6 issues at that particular house back in the day. For this one, now it's tough because buyers are really, really, I won't say desperate, but they're kind of desperate because they're exhausted. They're losing out multiple offers. Sometimes there's only a few multiples. Sometimes I heard from somebody in our office had a 25 multiple offer last week. I wouldn't say they're losing hope, but it's really a dire situation trying to win an offer sometimes. And it's stressful.
Wow.
Jim, it was just that somebody wanted to live in St. Paul that badly.
Maybe. Well,
I advocate for it.
That's a good point, Bill. We had professional photos done on it. Some of my descriptions, I was rocking it last Wednesday night. I may have had a martini. I don't know for sure. But I had headphones on listening to music. So I was putting in music quotes in my picture descriptions. I'm like, this listing was set to take off like it did. I mentioned that because it is on Como Park Conservatory. In some of my pictures, I typed in, this brings me back to childhood. This would be fantastic. And I didn't say families, but your entertainment is Como Park Zoo. It's the conservatory. It's a free zoo. Walk over there. You get to grow up on Como Park. It literally brought me back to my childhood. And it was such a good, happy feeling listing that I was feeling good just typing in descriptions and pictures about it. So
Jim, you've never actually been involved in a transaction where you've told your clients, hey, if you want to make a more attractive offer, let's forego the home inspection. But you have had clients bring that up to you anyway, right?
Well, I appreciate Ruben. You sound like an attorney there. I got to be careful when I say. No, I'm just kidding you. I won't say I haven't mentioned it before. People ask, what are our options? I'll say, well, it's a possibility. It's up to you ultimately. I just don't advocate for it. When buyers ask me in particular, I always say, well, we don't know what we're going to encounter. I'll have a pretty good idea. Maybe they will. You look at forms and infrastructure. I know, enough to be dangerous, but, you don't know about stuff you don't know about. I always try and advocate for it. Sometimes buyers they want it so bad, they don't want to do an inspection.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
No judgment here. I mean, if you do, I'm not trying to put you on the hot seat.
I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, Ruben's going to send this right on over. I'll go to realtor jail. I'm going to give you a great example. Friend of the family I've known since literally 4th, 5th grade. We bought a home for them south of the river. It was listed. It's mid-4s, gorgeous house. Newer construction. I don't remember the year off the top of my head, but newer construction, and they chose not to do an inspection. And, it was recently remodeled, gorgeous finishes, a really cool game room downstairs. I mean, this thing had me kind of going goo-goo over it. Literally, the day before closing, we had a little water issue that the sellers told us about. Oh, don't worry about it. There's something backed up and we cleaned it up. It's drying. Okay, well, that's fine. Inspection happened within the first week, summer 2020, basement flooded. And my buyers were freaking out. They called me. I'm like, well, obviously I knew we didn't have an inspection. I'm like, I have no idea. Was it coming up from a floor drain in the utility room? That's what everyone thought was happening. But really what happened was there was water in a half bath nearby the utility room. Water was coming up actually through the toilet line, out the bottom of the toilet, that was seeping out into the main living area in this game room and utility room and things like that. So upon further investigation, they had a camera scope done post-inspection, obviously. And it's somebody that you use at Structure Tech. So that guy's awesome. I always use Joe, actually.
Yeah, Sir Joe.
So Joe came out and literally found, he's like, it's kind of weird. This line pitches, but right at about this, I think it was 70 some feet, that main sewer line, the main line to the house is disconnected. And this was new construction. And so now it's outside the foundation, right? This had to have been known because it kind of seemed to have happened before the basement was newly remodeled. And then all of a sudden the story came together. You put two and two together. Did they have to remodel because they had a flood previously? Yada, yada, yada. And that was as a result of not a home inspection that would have found it, but a home inspection with a sewer scope inspection on a newer house. I don't know what the totals are so far, but we're kind of still going through that process right now with the previous sellers.
Such a good story right on the heels. And we just had Sewer Joe on our podcast recently.
Okay.
So
Yeah, shout out to Drain Busters.
I love Drain Busters. I love Joe. You get his office. And I'm like, I always tell my clients, I'm like, listen to Joe's narrative when he does it. It's kind of funny. I had some other major stories with Joe that happened in Edina a few years ago. And we were kind of all in shock. Joe was like, oh my gosh, I hit like the crown jewel of sewer scopes. And it just seems to happen to me and my clients. I think I invite chaos. I don't know.
We're going to have you back to dig into this house that you're just talking about, because there's a good story there. And
Sure.
After it all plays out, when we kind of whitewash all the names and protect the guilty and the innocent, it'll be curious to know who said what was held back. That's the question that's going on in my head. It's like, this doesn't add up.
Well, other than the one last summer with the sewer line there, and then what, we just sold last week in Como, here's invariably what may happen. Really good, thorough agents will follow up with a listing agent, try and gauge what's going on, see what the activity is, try and text me, try and email you, try and call you. The loan officer may try and call you and reach out. That's just a start, right? Before they actually submit an offer. Sometimes other agents won't, and they'll just submit an offer and email and go, hey, let me know if we get it. That's just amazing to me, but it still happens. It's the agents who are very thorough about the process, who inevitably their buyers, whether or not it's recommended by their agents, get to the point of going, how bad do we want it? What do we do? What are we willing to sacrifice? What are we going to risk, not risk, so on and so forth. That's where I think it gets to that point of inspection or no inspection, and how much in the inspection, or how do you word it, which is really what we're starting to talk about, because this offer last week, it ran the gamut. We had no inspections to verbiage in purchase agreements that said inspection, but it's not contingent upon the inspection. So I don't even know what that one meant. That was like second to last place. Another one was not contingent upon an inspection, but an inspection the buyers want to have for educational purposes. And within 4 days, and I'm like, wow, 4 days, you can get someone out there. Good for you. To inspection only if major structural or HVAC issues above $2,000 potentially be asked for, but This isn't going to be a nickel and diming thing. We want to make sure something major is not going on. So agents are starting to get creative in the other fields under inspection to describe exactly what it is they're looking to do.
Jim, to me, it sounds like people out there realize they need to do something to be more competitive if they're going to get the house, but they're all afraid to forgo the inspection.
Yeah, that inspection, it's tough. Well, it's a great point, Tessa. A lot of times what we see in the industry, I'm sure a lot of agents would say this, listing agents, is it depends on who your buyer is and what their confidence is. And if it's their first home or it's their move-up home or their third home, if it's their first home, that is a grueling tug of war probably going on. And if there's a married couple, it's probably between spouses. But a lot of times what we see is we also see parents that are involved, and they may be out at the house with the buyers, and they go through during the original showing or during the inspection, and parents even have a very different perspective versus, maybe not an unsuspecting first-time home buyer, their children, but a little more naive buyer who just doesn't have that experience yet with knowing what something might cost, or, it looks like an easy issue. It's really a big issue, or it's an expensive issue. So, parents sometimes play a part in a first-time buyer situation. Move-up buyers seem to be more confident, but they still do hesitate because you don't want to buy a lemon, and hopefully you don't, and you shouldn't based on disclosures. But, I think it's a confidence issue.
That kind of brings us up to the new service that we're rolling out here, that we have officially rolled out, which is it's to fill the gap. It's a stopgap service that we're offering now called a walkthrough consultation. And this is something where if somebody is insisting on writing an offer that's not contingent upon a home inspection, and of course, we don't advocate skipping the home inspection. Of course we don't. We're home inspectors. But we realize people are going to do it in this market today, and we're doing what we can to help them out. And it's basically where one of our home inspectors will attend one of the showings, and we will go through with a trained eye, and we will look at as much as time will allow us to look for big red flags. Let the home buyers know what they're getting, at least from a 30-minute walkthrough. That's what these are geared towards, is a 30-minute walkthrough with our clients. It's not a home inspection. We're not bringing tools along. We are bringing a flashlight. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. There's no ladder. There's no combustion analyzer. There's no opening the electrical panel. None of that stuff.
Yep.
If we were doing that during a showing, I think we'd have some people really freaked out.
Yeah.
So there's nothing crazy like that happening. It's just a trained eye. And we've got a group of our home inspectors who are going to be as on call as they possibly can be. I mean, we're not making any promise that we can be there in a half hour if you got a showing on a Saturday evening, but we're trying to open up our schedules as much as we possibly can to help people in these situations.
You bet. I think that's a great idea. It's funny. I just pulled up, I'm on MLS, and I'm looking at, boy, when do I kind of start remember it going sideways with multiple offers and yada, yada, yada. 2015, and I want to say Structure Tech inspected that home as well. It was in April 2015. These buyers I worked with, I think they were on their third or fourth home that they lost in multiples. I'm like, what's going on? This is weird. You pull up to a house and there's other parties there and they're all kind of waiting in line. And it used to happen before the recession too, but it's when I kind of started to notice it. And then what are you going to do to get creative to win a house, especially at a certain price point? So I think that's a good idea that Structure Tech do it. I'll call it a flyby walkthrough. The flybys pertain to, listing agents. If it's really busy, we're starting to limit showings to a half hour or even 15 minutes because 15 minutes is tough. I get it. Half hour is probably more suitable. It's just because the demand is there. If you do from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., that's 24 showings, half hour on the hour. So every half hour on the hour. So,
yeah.
Hey, Jim, can I ask you a question in terms of like the National Association of Realtors? I know you guys have a code of ethics that you're supposed to adhere to. Is there anything in the code of ethics that outlines that a realtor has to talk about home inspections, or they can't recommend against them? Or what's the actual language when it comes to this sort of thing?
Yeah, great question, Bill. So I'm going to try and go back to 2002 when I remember I worked with a lot of FHA home buyers. FHA explicitly, if somebody's doing FHA financing, literally the language is you must get a home inspection. It's part of their inspection FHA process. When you do it at that time, you did an FHA financing addendum and actually accompanied the addendum. Whether it's NAR or MAR or Minneapolis Association of Realtors, I mean, basically the code of ethics is there's so much to it now that hopefully you're advising your clients from a representation standpoint, so you don't have misrepresentation, to be very prudent in what their decision making is. And when it comes to inspections, it'd be my hope at least you're having the conversation. Ultimately, you can get them to the cliff, but you're not going to be the one jumping off as the realtor. They are. You just have to make sure you address the issue.
So, and then you can become what we are, which is sort of like fact finders, and you deliver what they need to know, the risk benefit of all of this, and then it's up to them.
Absolutely. Well, good question. A lot of times buyers, they're deer in the headlights, right? You got to protect your clients. You have to make sure that you're taking care of them. Sometimes they'll just defer to you 100%, whatever you think. You write in what you want to write in. We don't want to lose this house. So the agent is kind of guiding the process anyway. Sometimes buyers will be a little more desperate and they'll tell you how they want something to go, or they'll ask you quite a few questions or 100 questions just to exhaust the issue, so they could have analysis paralysis around it. But when it comes down to it, I think any agent is submitting an offer as a buyer's agent. They're having the conversation around inspection and inspection contingency. Now, part of the issue is availability for inspections to be done, but also agents can put in too many days for inspections, and that might throw sellers off sometimes. So what I saw in last week's listing, of the ones that did have inspections, there were some within 4 days. There was one at 6 days. There was one at 7 days. There was one at 8 days. I'm going to say the last one was a 10-day inspection, I think it was. So it run the gamut.
You know, I had a question for you, Jim. Before we started recording, you brought up an interesting perspective I hadn't even thought about before. With someone who's selling their house, even though this is a seller's market, you can still have a deal blow up, and you were taking steps to prevent this from happening. And I thought it was really interesting what you do with your clients in this situation.
Thank you for reminding me, Tessie. I'm like, I knew I was going to forget that we talked about it. Yeah, it's interesting because I went in, so just literally our podcast started at 2:00. I left a listing appointment in Edina at 1:35. And I told my sellers I would strongly consider a pre-list inspection from inspection company. I talked about Structure Tech, but also because I swear I helped bring Ruben into the business when he didn't even have chin hair. So anyway, today I threw it out to the sellers as an option. I said, here's what I'm starting to see in multiple offer situations, if your home even gets into that, which is if there's no inspection, you might have buyers start to hesitate to want to get into a multiple offer, because if they think they have to do an inspection, or they want to do an inspection and they don't think the sellers would want it, it kind of creates a conundrum for both parties, where seller, your buyer might be scared away because they don't think you're going to allow one, or you did not do a pre-inspection. And on the flip side, the buyers might think the sellers don't want any inspections. And so they're, you kind of do a waltz, right? And you dance around the issue. I'm starting to recommend to sellers, get that pre-inspection, get that pre-radon test done, get your stucco test done ahead of time, start loading it up, and think of it as an investment, because if it is going to be as busy as this market seems to be, people are going to be a little confident if you provide that up front.
Was that Rhonda Wilson we had on when we were talking about pre-listing inspections a while back? Not a whole lot of agents do or recommend, but with this market, it's interesting.
Rhonda's at Caldwell, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I like Rhonda. Her and I have some good conversations once in a while. There's some great Caldwell agents who recommend them. I know 2 or 3 Edina Realty agents who recommend pre-inspections and pre-warranties all the time. It's just starting to be something that I'm seriously, I think helps in the entire transaction process.
Hey, Jim, if somebody gets a pre-listing inspection like that and something turns up, say there's an issue, but we're in this crazy market, what does the seller do at that point? Do they just disclose the thing that turned up and said, hey, the list price is factoring that in, so don't ask me to fix that, but I need you to know that it exists?
Yeah, good question, Bill. Well, it's a 6 of one, half dozen of another. If you get an inspection as a seller and there clearly is maybe some items that may or may not need to be addressed, you have to make sure you're disclosing it. Every agent should be telling their clients, disclose, disclose, disclose. Do not avoid disclosing something you should. Sometimes people forget, about certain things. That's understandable. An inspection is also a little bit of CYA to go, hey, I don't know how the interior of this furnace is working. Maybe it's pushing 7-8 years old. We don't know if it has a cracked heating chamber or something like that, where it's really interesting because if stuff comes up in the inspection, what I tell my sellers in that scenario is, hey, it would have came up anyway. We don't want it to scare away a buyer after the fact when we're finding out about it, down the road versus up front, knowing how we could either address it or when you disclose it, that they know about it. Mm-hmm. So again, it's part of the disclose, disclose, disclose. That inspection, in my mind, is not just peace of mind. It's, hey, there it is. We're not trying to hide anything, obviously never, from a seller standpoint, agent standpoint, because material facts is we'd have to disclose it anyway as listing agents. Everything's out there for everyone to look through because we're all above board, but this is a stressful time, particularly with inventory down where it's at. So
follow-up question, just because there's a material defect with the property doesn't mean that the owner of that property has to fix it. It just means it has to be disclosed.
Absolutely. It depends on if it's a Tish city and it's a hazard, it's an H versus a below or meets or something like that. If it's a code issue, whatever. A lot of times when ultimately what might happen is it'll get down to any inspection could have 15 to 30 items or more flagged, right? Of those, hopefully agents are guiding their clients to say, hey, we don't want to ask for necessarily a $2 switch plate, and things like that. We want to make sure safe, sanitary, sound, that it isn't going to aggravate the other party if it's asked for. But, if it's an electrical issue, if it's a double tap wire, if it's electrical box sunk into a wall too far, plumbing, heating, something gas related, obviously it could be a roof issue, whatever. It's more along those things, but at least it's in an inspection. Hopefully it's caught in an inspection because it's stuff sellers may not know either. It's just good to have, it's good practice to have that out there, not to be taken advantage of, but just kind of as informational purposes. That was a long answer. I apologize, Bill, if I didn't even answer it. But
well, I have a follow-up to the follow-up, but I'm going to pivot here and just say, if a buyer is going to forego an inspection or they're going to try to do something, a flyby, as you call it, what do you expect for something like that to cost?
Good question. Right away, Bill, my answer is going to be, I'd hate to know what the cost is down the road if you don't catch the issue, right? If you choose not to do an inspection, it comes up after the fact, whether it's like that sewer issue I talked about last year, which I think it ran 17, 19 grand, $150, $200, whatever. I don't think that is out of the question, especially from a schedule availability, that it would be fair and equitable to ask it. The issue is how many people are going to be interested in it. There's bigger challenges versus make sure you get that walkthrough inspection done, because then at least you kind of did some sort of due diligence as a buyer.
All I heard, Jim, is that these are priceless. And
priceless.
It should definitely be 4 figures, whatever we're charging. That's all I heard.
Yeah, there you go. Well, it's interesting, you guys. The types of stuff I'm negotiating now and in the last several years are things that, again, safe, sanitary, sound. But I know based on tonnage how big a furnace or air conditioner needs to be. You start getting into several thousands of dollars, and if it's rough or whatever. The issue is you have some buyers who might already be going up to their max. They only have so much for down payment. They have earnest money, obviously, that would go towards their down payment. They're paying for some inspections. They don't want to risk not having an inspection only to find out if they get that home after the fact, all of a sudden they don't have an emergency fund started and a $5,000 issue slaps them across the face. It's happened to clients that I know. It's not necessarily because they didn't have an inspection. It's just stuff breaks, stuff goes out, stuff needs to be addressed. So obviously anything you can do to help the cause upfront or during the process, I think is very prudent. An ounce of protection up front is huge in general. It'll come down to how badly did they want the house. It's a commodities market, right? It's almost gambling right now based on if you're going to make an offer with or without an inspection, that's one of the terms that you're gambling on for sure.
Ruben, I wanted to turn to you and ask you, this is something that's different than the industry is accustomed to seeing. So tell me, how do we put parameters or brackets around this? What is this? Do you have standards of practice now that you're following? What are we doing here?
Fall within home inspection standards of practice simply because it is not a home inspection. And when we do these, we make it abundantly clear to our clients that this is a verbal consultation. We are there to look, we're going to talk. You do not get a report. You're going to have to take your own notes. And again, maybe if I didn't make that clear, it's not a home inspection. So I know there's a lot of home inspectors who have heard about this and they're freaking out and they're going, you can't do that. You got to produce a report. It violates the code of ethics and shaking the fist. But I'm sorry, this is not a home inspection. This has nothing to do with home inspection standards of practice. This is a consultation only. And by the way, just to work in the price, we agreed this would be a $200 consultation. And it's up to a half hour. And if we have people who are going to multiple homes, one right after the other, it's $100 for each subsequent consultation. I almost said inspection there.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I think most home inspectors, if you're a home inspector and you're listening to this, have you ever had a family member or a friend ask you an opinion on a house, or if they're about to buy a house, hey, can you come look at this for me quick? And they just want your expert opinion about it, right? I've had that happen to me. I've helped family members, friends, and I've done this kind of walkthrough consultation many a time before for people. Not a full-blown home inspection. I didn't bring my tools. It was just a quick walkthrough looking at the exterior, the grading, the drainage, the roof, the furnace, the water heater, the big systems, making sure the foundation looks good, if it's visible, if it's an old house, what kind of plumbing material is here, all those things, right? Is there a Federal Pacific sky block panel in the corner, looking for the big things. And that's all that we're doing.
Awesome. Well, Jim, thank you for your time. I want to ask you back sometime because I'd love to get into the strategy of pricing houses. And that's a whole different conversation. And I think we'd get off into the ditch if we started doing that now. But thank you very much for your expertise and just sharing the story with the Como Park House, which is unbelievable.
Yeah.
You're very welcome. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
And, hey, Jim, if people want to find you, where can they go?
What's best? Give me a call or send me a text, 612-247-5898.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Jim. And Ruben, let's set up a realtor roundtable to discuss pricing strategies. I want to know who's coming in with what when they're sitting down at the listing. I'm fascinated by that conversation. Anyway, I digress. Sorry. Everybody, I'm sorry to be on the air talking about the next episode. You've been listening to Structure Talk, a Structure Tech presentation. My name is Bill Ulrich, alongside Tessa Murray and Ruben Saltzman, your three-legged stool in the Northland. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.
For more information on how we can provide you with the right information about your home before you buy or sell, contact us at structuretech.com.